The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. The prince, Patroclus, son of Menœtius, was small and slight, not fast, not strong, and he couldn't sing. His father, King Menœtius, was a bull of a man, short and broad-shouldered, disappointed in his unremarkable son. Patroclus's mother, veiled until their wedding, was revealed to be simple, a fact that further diminished Patroclus's standing in his father's eyes. At the age of 5, Patroclus witnessed the prince of Phthia win the footrace. The boy, Achilles, with hair like spun honey and a golden circlet, was shorter than the other racers, but moved with effortless grace. King Peleus, ruler of the small kingdom of Phthia, embraced his victorious son, radiating pride. Menœtius, envious, pointed to Achilles and declared, "That is what a son should be." The words pierced Patroclus, a wound that festered in the young prince's heart. Years passed in the chilly shadow of his father's disapproval. One day, while playing with a pair of ivory dice, Patroclus encountered Cleisonimus, a cruel and fleshy nobleman's son. Cleisonimus taunted Patroclus, revealing the king's disdain for his son. In a fit of rage, Patroclus shoved Cleisonimus, whose head struck a rock, killing him. Faced with the wrath of the nobleman's family, Menœtius exiled Patroclus, sending him to be fostered in King Peleus's court. Phthia was a small kingdom, but its king was favored by the gods, blessed with a sea nymph wife, Thetis. Thetis, however, was bound to Peleus against her will, forced into marriage after being tricked and overpowered. She bore him a single son, Achilles, and returned to the sea as soon as her obligation was fulfilled. Achilles, raised by tutors and the wise counselor Phoenix, inherited his mother's otherworldly beauty and his father's gentle nature. Patroclus, stripped of his title and belongings, found himself among other foster boys in the Phthian barracks. He was haunted by nightmares of Cleisonimus, his cracked skull and accusing eyes. During meals in the great hall, Patroclus observed Achilles, his effortless grace and easy laughter, surrounded by admirers. A spark of envy ignited within Patroclus, fueled by Achilles' seemingly effortless charm. One evening, Achilles sat at Patroclus's usual table, captivating the other boys with his skillful juggling. He tossed a fig to Patroclus, a small gesture that resonated with the exiled prince. The next day, Patroclus was summoned before King Peleus, who questioned his exile. Achilles intervened, claiming Patroclus as his companion, saving him from punishment. Thus began their unusual friendship. Achilles, unburdened by princely duties, spent his days exploring the kingdom with Patroclus. They swam, climbed trees, and shared stories. Patroclus confessed his crime, and Achilles, surprised by the cruelty Cleisonimus had shown, expressed his own anger. Their bond deepened, Patroclus finding solace in Achilles' genuine acceptance, a balm to the wounds of his past. One afternoon, Achilles invited Patroclus to witness his private combat practice. Patroclus was awestruck by Achilles' speed and skill, a divine gift inherited from his goddess mother. He challenged Achilles to a fight, but Achilles refused, adhering to his mother's decree to keep his prowess hidden. Patroclus' persistence led to a playful wrestling match, ending with a confession, "There is no one like you." Achilles, disarmed by Patroclus' honesty, smiled. Their friendship blossomed, days filled with laughter and shared secrets. One day, Achilles asked Patroclus to accompany him to his lyre lesson. To Patroclus' surprise, Achilles presented him with his mother's lyre, a cherished possession from his former life. The music filled Patroclus with a bittersweet longing, a reminder of his lost mother. One sun-drenched afternoon on the beach, Patroclus impulsively kissed Achilles. Startled, Achilles fled. Patroclus, horrified by his own boldness, feared he had ruined their friendship. Thetis, enraged by the budding romance, appeared before Patroclus, warning him away from her son. She revealed her ambition for Achilles to become a god and coldly predicted Patroclus' imminent death. Thetis, bound by divine decree to remain with Peleus for a year, resented her mortal husband and their son's human frailty. She yearned for Achilles to embrace his divine heritage and ascend to godhood. She visited him regularly, whispering of the wonders of the undersea world, tempting him away from his mortal life. Achilles, torn between his mother's ambition and his earthly attachments, confided in Patroclus. He revealed a prophecy foretelling his destiny as the greatest warrior of his generation and his mother's desire for him to be recognized by the gods and granted immortality. He admitted his own uncertainty about becoming a god, expressing his contentment with his life in Phthia. Patroclus, relieved, confessed his own fear of losing Achilles. Their friendship deepened into love, nights filled with whispered confessions and shared dreams. They kept their relationship secret, fearing the disapproval of Chiron and Peleus. One night, after overhearing Peleus encourage Achilles to pursue a serving girl, Patroclus's frustration boiled over. Achilles, sensing his turmoil, confessed his own disinterest in the girl, and their unspoken desires finally found expression. Their love blossomed, a secret world shared between them in the quiet hours of the night. One night, Thetis commanded Patroclus to meet her on the beach. She warned him of the dangers of their relationship, reminding him of his mortality and her son's divine destiny. Patroclus, undeterred, vowed to remain by Achilles' side. The following spring, Achilles was summoned home by his father, news of Helen's abduction and the impending war reaching even remote Phthia. Bound by an oath sworn years before, Achilles was obligated to join the Greek army sailing to Troy. Patroclus, no longer bound by his father's oath after his exile, was free to stay behind. But he knew he could not leave Achilles. As the Greek army gathered at Aulis, the winds ceased to blow, stranding the fleet. The priest Calchas declared that the goddess Artemis was angered by the impending bloodshed and demanded a sacrifice. Agamemnon, driven by ambition, agreed to sacrifice his own daughter, Iphigenia, deceiving Achilles into believing she was to be his bride. The horrific act traumatized Achilles, leaving him questioning the morality of the war and the nature of his own destiny. The winds returned, and the Greek fleet sailed to Troy. Achilles, his heart hardened by the events at Aulis, unleashed his fury upon the Trojans, his divine speed and skill making him an unstoppable force on the battlefield. Patroclus, horrified by the brutality of war, found solace in caring for the wounded, using the medical knowledge he had learned from Chiron. The war raged on, years passing in a cycle of raids, battles, and uneasy truces. Achilles, driven by his thirst for glory, achieved legendary status, his name echoing throughout the Greek camp. Patroclus, his heart torn by the suffering he witnessed, distanced himself from the fighting, dedicating his time to healing the wounded. Agamemnon, consumed by greed and envy, seized Briseis from Achilles, a prize of war that represented Achilles' honor. Enraged, Achilles withdrew from the fighting, vowing not to return until Agamemnon apologized and restored his honor. Patroclus, torn between his loyalty to Achilles and his compassion for the suffering Greeks, pleaded with Achilles to relent. As the Trojans, emboldened by Achilles' absence, pushed the Greeks back to their ships, Patroclus, desperate to save the army and restore Achilles' honor, made a fateful decision. He donned Achilles' armor, hoping to frighten the Trojans with the mere appearance of the great warrior. On the battlefield, Patroclus, fueled by adrenaline and the weight of Achilles' armor, found himself swept up in the fighting. He achieved unexpected victories, his actions inspiring the Greeks and terrifying the Trojans. But his triumph was short-lived. Recognized by the god Apollo as an impostor, Patroclus was struck down and killed by Hector. Achilles, consumed by grief and rage, vowed revenge. Ignoring his mother's pleas and the prophecies of his own death, he returned to the battlefield, a force of nature unleashed upon the Trojans. He sought out Hector, their greatest warrior, and in a brutal duel, killed him, dragging his body behind his chariot in a display of savage triumph. Thetis, mourning the loss of her son's humanity, pleaded with Achilles to return Hector's body to his family. Achilles, his heart hardened by grief and rage, refused. But in the dead of night, Priam, the aged king of Troy, made his way into Achilles' tent, a supplicant begging for his son's body. Moved by Priam's grief, Achilles relented, a flicker of his former compassion returning. The war raged on, new heroes rising to challenge Achilles. He faced them all, his grief and rage fueling his invincibility. But his time was running out. Paris, guided by the god Apollo, shot a poisoned arrow into Achilles' heel, the only vulnerable spot on his body. Achilles, his brief life of glory fulfilled, died on the battlefield. The sea nymphs mourned Achilles, preparing his body for cremation. Thetis, her heart broken, vowed to preserve her son's memory. The Greeks, honoring their fallen hero, built a magnificent tomb, a monument to his brief but glorious life. But Pyrrhus, Achilles' young son, arrived at Troy, claiming his father's legacy. He refused to allow Patroclus to be buried with Achilles, deeming him unworthy. As the Greeks prepared to sail home, Odysseus, moved by a rare pang of guilt, pleaded with Pyrrhus to honor Achilles' wish and bury Patroclus with his beloved companion. Pyrrhus, consumed by his own ambition and a thirst for vengeance, refused. Patroclus, his spirit tethered to the earth, mourned his separation from Achilles. He watched as Thetis visited Achilles' tomb, her grief a cold and distant thing. Driven by his love for Achilles and a desire to preserve his true memory, Patroclus shared his memories with Thetis, revealing the depths of their love and the true nature of Achilles' heart. Moved by Patroclus' words, Thetis relented. She added Patroclus' name to Achilles' tomb, a final act of love that united the two souls for eternity. Released from his earthly bonds, Patroclus joined Achilles in the underworld, their love a beacon in the endless night. If you enjoyed this book breakdown, please consider liking this video and subscribing to get notified when we post our next book.